In 2001, the world's eyes were fixed on a single tragedy, the 9/11 attacks in the United States and everything that followed. But just 3 months later, another moment unfolded, a moment that slipped quietly past the headlines, yet would go on to reshape global power, economics, and politics in ways far deeper than anyone imagined. December 11th, 2001, a date many have forgotten, the day China was formally welcomed into the World Trade Organization. At the time, it seemed like a technical trade decision, something for economists and diplomats to discuss. Nothing more. But beneath the surface, it was a turning point, a decision that would rewrite the economic trajectory of the United States, Europe, Asia, and every resource-rich nation trading in oil, metals, and minerals. This single agreement triggered a transformation that is still echoing across the world today. It quietly laid the groundwork for the global financial crisis that would strike years later. It redirected millions of industrial and manufacturing jobs from Western factories to Chinese production lines. And as those jobs left, communities across the Western world, especially in G7 countries, felt the impact. Factories closed, towns struggled, political tensions rose, setting the stage for the deep divisions and economic anxieties we see in modern politics. It was an event that received little attention in its moment, but its consequences are still shaping the world we live in today. And today, that story continues. Stay with us. This is USMag. At the time, supporters of China's entry into the global trading system, including former US President Bill Clinton, believed something deeply optimistic. They felt that opening China to economic freedom, a core pillar of democracy, would eventually encourage political freedom as well. The idea was simple. If the world's most populous nation gained access to new markets, new opportunities, and a chance for its people to shape their own futures, then, over time, they would begin to demand a meaningful voice in how their country was governed. Clinton said it clearly back then. When people not only dream, but gain the power to achieve those dreams, they begin to insist that their opinions matter in the decisions of the state. But the belief that China would become more open as it became more prosperous slowly proved to be misguided. Even so, this assumption guided Washington and Beijing for decades. It shaped long-term engagement, steady trade, and growing economic ties between the two capitals. It was the foundation of a partnership through which more than $500 billion worth of goods crossed the Pacific every year, connecting factories, supply chains, and markets across continents. Yet the strategy did not unfold the way its architects had imagined. Instead of liberalizing, China began its rapid rise toward becoming the world's second-largest economic power, a rise that many now believe will soon make it the largest economy on Earth. Even Charlene Barshefsky, the U.S. representative who helped negotiate China's entry into the WTO, later acknowledged this shift. Speaking at an International Trade Association panel in Washington, she noted that China's economic structure had proven a long-held Western belief partly incorrect, the belief that a tightly controlled political system cannot coexist with a highly innovative society. She emphasized that this doesn't mean China's innovation comes from its economic model. Rather, it shows that what appears contradictory or incompatible from a Western perspective does not always mirror reality on the ground. A reminder that globalization often unfolds in ways the world never expects. It is a striking irony of history that Joe Biden, who, as president, treated China increasingly as a competitor, was once one of the central figures advocating for China's entry into the World Trade Organization in the late 1990s, back when he served in the U.S. Senate. During a visit to Shanghai in 2000, he told reporters, "China is not our enemy." This statement reflected a belief widely held at the time that expanding trade would gradually integrate China into a system of shared principles and global norms and guide its rise as a responsible member of the international community. China's membership in the WTO became a reality under President George W. Bush, following decades of support from U.S. leaders going back to Richard Nixon. Corporate America was also eager for China to open its markets. British American Tobacco sought access to Chinese consumers, while the US-China Business Council wanted entry to a low-cost, compliant workforce. In May 2000, then-Governor George W. Bush, speaking to Boeing employees in Texas, captured the sentiment best. Trade with China is not just about commerce. It is about trust. Economic freedom nurtures habits of liberty, and habits of liberty create expectations for democracy. For a brief moment, China's growing wealth seemed to hold the promise of limited political reforms. In the years after WTO accession, the internet gave Chinese citizens opportunities to discuss, debate, and even dissent, possibilities that were unimaginable before. For multinational corporations, China's WTO entry offered enormous profit potential. Supply chains connected to Chinese labor, new markets opened for Chinese consumers, and a wave of business opportunities swept across the globe. The United Kingdom's so-called golden era of trade with China began during Xi Jinping's first term, framed as a mantra of commerce, and continued into his second. Even during this period, a UK chancellor visited Xinjiang, ostensibly to highlight regional trade opportunities, even as the area had already become the center of serious human rights concerns. Politicians from democratic states consistently promoted the benefits of engagement, yet human rights issues were often addressed quietly, behind closed doors. During the same period, Hunter Biden, President Joe Biden's youngest son, forged business relationships with Chinese institutions linked to the Communist Party. These ties remain a central focus of political controversy to this day. It is a story that reminds us that global trade, diplomacy, and personal ambition often intersect in ways the world never fully anticipates. It is important to remember that until the year 2000, China's role in global trade was largely confined to being the world's largest producer of inexpensive plastic goods. Significant, yes, but not yet a force capable of reshaping the global economy, or turning China into the economic powerhouse it is today. China's rise in global trade, however, laid the groundwork for a profound transformation across the world. This growth was driven by a powerful combination: a massive, disciplined workforce, high-quality factories, and close partnerships between the Chinese government and Western multinational companies. Together, these elements began to slowly redraw the economic map of the world. After joining the World Trade Organization, China's army of low-wage workers began producing goods that met Western standards of living. Through major global companies, China quickly positioned itself as a critical hub in the international supply chain. Economists refer to this phenomenon as a supply shock, a surge in global supply whose effects were, and still are, felt around the world. China's integration into the global market also produced extraordinary economic outcomes. Perhaps the most remarkable of these was the near elimination of extreme poverty. Before China joined the WTO, roughly 500 million people lived in extreme poverty. Today, that number is almost zero. During this period, China's economy grew 12-fold, and its foreign exchange reserves multiplied 16 times, reaching $2.5 trillion. In 2000, China ranked as the seventh largest exporter of goods in the world, but its extraordinary growth quickly propelled it to the top. One way to measure this rise is by looking at shipping containers, the universal symbols of global trade. Within 5 years of joining the WTO, the number of containers moving to and from China doubled, from 40 million to 80 million, and by 2011, it had tripled again. In 2020, the global flow of shipping containers surged into the hundreds of millions. Notably, half of the containers arriving in China were empty, while every container leaving China was fully loaded. Alongside this economic boom, China also built an immense road network. In 1997, the country had just 4,700 kilometers of highways. By 2020, this had grown to 161,000 kilometers, connecting 99% of cities, and forming the largest road network in the world. To support its export-driven economy, China needed vast quantities of raw materials, metals, minerals, and energy resources, with steel being particularly vital. In 2005, China began exporting steel for the first time and has since become the world's largest steel exporter. In the 1990s, China produced approximately 100 million tons of steel annually. By the first quarter of the 21st century, that number had surpassed 1 billion tons per year. A similar pattern emerged for other critical materials needed for production. China has also become the world's largest supplier of goods, ranging from electronics to clothing, from toys to furniture. Between 2000 and 2005, clothing exports alone doubled, capturing one-third of the global market. Over time, rising costs in China led some manufacturing, particularly in clothing, to move to countries such as Bangladesh and Vietnam, as companies sought more affordable production. It is a story of transformation, of a nation that rose from modest beginnings to dominate the global supply chain, and in doing so, reshaped the world's economy. Former Minister Long Yangtu, a key figure behind China's entry into the World Trade Organization, often said it would be wrong to directly link China's accession to the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States or the West. The real issue, he explained, was that as China's economy began to grow, it also created an export market for the entire world. He emphasized that blaming China is easy, but pointing fingers does not solve the problem. If China had not been part of this story, it is quite possible that U.S. manufacturing jobs would have simply shifted to Mexico, he said. He recalled the story of a Chinese glass manufacturer struggling to open a factory in the United States. He couldn't even find competent workers. He told me that their appetites were just too large. The question now is, has China's economic rise reached its limits? China has achieved remarkable success as a member of the World Trade Organization. Yet both former President Joe Biden and current President Donald Trump have shown interest in erecting new barriers to challenge China. The United States is actively pursuing new economic and diplomatic alignments against China, stretching across Europe and Asia. According to former U.S. Trade Representative Charlene Barshevsky, China's current model of growth is likely to generate points of tension. It is an economic system firmly under state control, one that favors select industries and strengthens itself in the process. If China begins to see itself as the leader of the fourth industrial revolution, then the World Trade Organization could face serious challenges, she warned. 2 decades later, a decision that received little attention at the time has reshaped the world. For China, the outcome was a major success, while the West's strategy did not achieve its intended goals. Politically, the West remained dominant, but economically, the West began to mirror China. It is a story of unintended consequences, of global trade, and the shifting balance of economic power. If you found this journey insightful, like, subscribe, share this video, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Stay with us for the next chapter.